Welcome to the InnoGuide podcast. I'm your host, Bob Boudelier. This podcast, my website, and my weekly newsletter are all focused on bringing you the secrets of innovation. Since I don't rely on paid ads, I want to thank our customers who subscribe to our AI Fusion Kickstarter program and those who leverage AI Fusion coaching to bring human-centered AI into their organizations. You can find us at www.innoguide.net. In this episode, number 63, we're sharing the ABCs of How We Learn by Daniel Schwartz, Jessica Tsang, and Kristen Blair. Without further ado, please enjoy this episode, The ABCs of How We Learn. Welcome to the InnoGuide podcast, where we share the works of authors and mentors to guide innovation. Let's get started. What follows is a guided tour through the ABCs, 26 research-backed core mechanics of learning, framed the way we teach them. What it is, why it works, when to use it, and what to watch for. I'll weave in key examples from the book so you can hear how these ideas sound in real classrooms, studio labs, and workplaces. When I chose this book, what I was thinking about is how to teach AI. And I wanted to be sure that the known learning methods out in the world were being applied to the teaching that I do. What I was finding is that people who were watching video courses were understanding the material when they first saw it, but they weren't retaining it. So that led me to read the book, The ABCs of How We Learn. This book is organized, as you might guess, in alphabetical order. So let's start with the introduction. First question is, have you taught? Of course you've taught. We all have. Teaching isn't confined to classrooms. It's woven into everyday life, showing a toddler how to peel a banana, orienting a visitor to the commuter train, giving feedback on a stats assignment, coaxing a puppy to sit. When a tactic falls flat, like fumbling through verbal directions until you finally sketch a map, that's not failure, it's a clue. Different kinds of learning thrive on different kinds of teaching. That's the core premise of this book. Learning isn't a single system managed by a central processor. The brain is a set of distinct learning systems, each with its own circuitry and appetite. Good instruction means feeding the right system for the outcome you want. If you want people to handle frustration better, let them observe a role model instead of lecturing them to buck up. If you want to change habits, lean on reinforcement rather than willpower. The goal of the book is to help you understand how learning works and to creatively design instruction, whether for yourself or others, that matches mechanisms to goals. At Stanford, we built a very practical course around this idea, and we call it the core mechanics of learning. Core mechanic borrows from the games, the simple, repeatable interaction that drives progress. Hit the golf ball into a hole, rotate Tetris pieces into place. Learning has its own core mechanics, and effective teaching is arranging those interactions deliberately. We shift away from traditional textbooks because they rarely integrate theory, research, and practice in a way that was crisply actionable for our wonderfully mixed audiences, new and veteran teachers, undergrads, grads, lawyers, physicians, engineers, and whatnot, and learning tech designers. Instead, we organize the course around specific mechanisms, why each works, what it's good for, and how to use it. Demand quickly outgrew a single quarter, and students wanted more mechanics. Human learning is that engaging. This book is our ABC of 26 core mechanics, chosen for strong evidence, clear theories, and direct implications. We made tough calls. We chose A for analogy over A for attention. We don't pretend it's exhaustive, but the science of learning has boomed in the last 15 years, helped by the National Science Foundation investments and centers like Life, where we worked. Think of this as the most useful, high-yield set we could assemble. Perhaps one day we'll write the other ABCs. Each chapter follows the same structure, so you can move from understanding to application. What it is, how it works, how to use it, what it's good for, risks, good and bad examples, references, and cheat sheet. In this podcast, we're not going to cover all of those, but we will certainly cover the very first ones and the cheat sheet at the end, because real teaching often aims at multiple outcomes at once, memorizing formulas, understanding why they work, and building identity or interest. You'll find that combining mechanics is very powerful. For a science lesson, you might enlist GAP, generation, analogy, and participation, or MET, making, elaboration, and teaching. Even for a single outcome, several complementary mechanics can reinforce each other. For memorization, for instance, E, G, X, and Z can team up. So these will be described in each of the letters of the alphabet. To help you get started, here are how some chapters map to familiar goals. These are entry points, not the whole story. There's a list here of 9 different groupings, which they're calling the maps. I'll just list the names of them. Conceptual understanding, which will be analogy, just-in-time telling, and undoing, A, J, and U. Memory, motivation, expertise, study skills, sense of inclusion, problem-solving, and collaboration, and discovery. A few quick examples bring the ideas to life. Coaching a puppy with treats demonstrates reinforcement over exhortation for habit change. Letting learners watch a calm response to a setback makes self-regulation observable and something you can imitate rather than being told. Designing the conditions for learning is deeply creative and satisfying. This book equips you with mechanisms, evidence, and patterns so you can analyze existing instruction, say an online math game, and ask, which learning system does this engage? What does it miss? How could I arrange better interactions? In short, teaching leads to learning when we orchestrate the right interactions for the brain's many systems. That's what these ABCs are for. Chapter A. A is for analogy. Finding the general principle. Let's start with something you've likely seen 100 times, an analogy question. Deluge is to droplet as blank. Many people pick the watery options because they share surface features. But the right answer, landslide to pebble, shares the deep structure, a catastrophe built from many small parts. That's the heart of analogical learning. Look past surface similarities to the underlying relation. 2 examples are better than one because they help you triangulate the deep structure and ignore the distracting surface details. How these work? Surface features are the obvious trappings: water, weather, rocks. Deep structure is the relational skeleton, the small things combining into one large outcome. Learning to see the deep structure lets learners recognize when a principle applies in new contexts, even when everything on the surface looks different. That's why giving 2 or more examples that share a principle but differ on the surface is so potent. This variability focuses attention on the invariant core. So how do we use these in teaching? There are 2 reliable moves. Explain the new with the familiar, such as this: blood vessels as highways, Earth's layers as a peach. My favorite historic example is Kepler. He reasoned that gravity weakens with distance by analogy to sunlight fading with distance. It wasn't a single eureka. He painstakingly mapped the analogy over years to explain elliptical orbits. Teachers can save students time by selecting good base analogies that align with the target idea. Have learners introduce the structure from multiple examples. This is far more powerful than one example plus a stated rule. In Glick and Holiak's classic work with the Dunker's radiation problem, students who studied 2 different analogs, a general dividing troops across bridges or firefighters using multiple hoses, were far more likely to transfer split forces to converge principle to solve a tumor problem later without hints. The tumor problem was, if you have to irradiate a tumor and radiation at a high level causes death to the tumor cells, but could also cause death to the healthy cells, how do you irradiate a tumor to get rid of it successfully, applying the same amount of energy in a way that doesn't kill the other cells? And you would just have multiple heads putting lower amounts of energy so that they don't kill the cells that they're going through on the path to the tumor, but when they all converge, you get the same amount of energy. So that was a way to think of how to use this analogy principle. So the bottom line here is analogies are engines of transfer. Give learners multiple varied examples that share a deep structure, ask them to map the sameness, and only then formalize the principle. Do that and they won't just understand, they'll know when and how to use what they've learned. Chapter B. B is for belonging. Silencing anxiety and burying in. If you've ever watched a student sink into the back row, eyes down, participation fading, you might assume boredom or low effort. But often the real culprit is quieter. I don't belong here. I've heard it directly, students whispering versions of, I'm not supposed to be here. And when that belief takes root, it drains attention, raises anxiety, and blocks learning. The good news, belonging is malleable. With small, smart moves, both psychological and structural, we can lift effort, persistence, and performance. So how does it work? Learning is social, even when we're alone with a textbook. The text, the norms, the room, the history of who belongs in this subject, all of it sends signals. People constantly read those signals through the lens of identity and stereotypes. If a student believes people like me aren't welcome in math or college or the classroom, anxiety creeps in and siphons cognitive resources. That's the stereotype threat. Performance drops not because of ability, but because of mental bandwidth consumed by belonging doubts. 2 routes to boost belonging. Short, targeted belonging activities can inoculate students against reading adversity as a sign that they don't fit in. In one of the studies, first-year college students read upperclassmen's accounts. I worried about belonging at first, but it got better. Then they wrote and recorded their own reflections for future students. 3 years later, Black students who did this 1-hour exercise had dramatically narrowed the GPA gap by 79% compared to controls. The intervention didn't change grades for white students, likely because they already felt that they belonged. Belonging reframes ambiguous moments. A tough comment from a teacher can be read as, "I'm not cut out for this," or "Here's a growth target." With the right narrative, students choose the latter and persist. Bottom line, belonging quiets the mental noise of, "Do I fit?" so learners can spend their cognitive resources on the task at hand. When students feel accepted, valued, and included, they try harder, stick with difficulty longer, and perform better. Design for belonging, and you unlock effort that you can't mandate any other way. C. C is for contrasting cases. Discerning critical information. If you look at a single pair of scissors, you'll see the basics: 2 blades, a handle, and a pivot. That's the novice view. But you put that same pair along close cousins, and suddenly the hidden story pops. Thick blades and a near pivot for force, jumbo handles for multi-finger leverage. That's why pair D is perfect for toenails. The power of contrasting cases, close examples that force your eye and mind to notice what you'd otherwise miss. 2 examples are better than 1 here, but the trick is to keep them similar so that the differences matter. How contrasting cases work. Experts don't just know more, they see more. Archaeologists read subtle soil differences. Fluent readers never confuse the lowercase letters B and D. That precision comes from years of comparing near-miss examples. Contrasting cases compress that journey by curating those juxtapositions. In math, Kelman, Marcy, and Son showed students rapid-fired triads that shared numbers but differed in structure, equations versus graphs. With immediate right-wrong feedback and no explanation, students learn to see the structure, not chase the familiar numbers, tripling their graph equation translation despite already having taken algebra. The design principle for analogies, Chapter A, you spread examples far apart to reveal the common deep structure. For contrast, you keep the examples close to surface identical so the distinctive features pop. Different tool, different spacing. Designing effective contrasts. Don't show only positive instances and a definition. If polygon means closed 2D straight sides, no crossings, students also need non-polygons that violate one feature at a time, curves, openings, crossings. Without contrasts, novices assume the missing features are just accidental omissions. Choose contrasts that isolate the dimensions you care about. Too many differences, and learners drown in the noise. Classic apples to oranges problem. Tighten the case so a single feature varies. And then frame the task towards significance. Compare and contrast is too vague. Students will latch on to incidental differences, page position of scissors, etc., unless you ask with purpose. Contrast these with an eye to function. Which features make each best for the job? What contrasting cases achieve? Precision of noticing. Learners pick up the meaningful details. A simple assessment is a redraw test. After viewing a figure, like the lone scissors, having students recreate it, missing features reveal what they haven't learned to see. Teaching yourself with contrast. People often think they already see everything. There's this penny illusion. Most people can't pick the correct face on a penny despite lifelong exposure. You have multiple different faces. So first, sell the method. Side by side beats repetition. When you know the question, you can pick your own contrast. Vary one thing, hold the rest constant. Narrow versus wide springs to test diameter's effect on springiness. That's experimental design in miniature. The bottom line? Contrasting cases sharpen perception and make knowledge usable. By holding most things constant and varying just what matters, you help students see the signal in the noise, and once they can see it, they can use it at just the right time for the right reasons. Chapter D, Deliberate Practice, Becoming an Expert. If you've ever hit a plateau, playing pickup basketball every weekend, grinding through problem sets, or strumming the same songs, you've met the limit of just doing the thing. Deliberate practice is how you break through. It's focused, effortful work on specific skills just beyond your current ability, done outside the heat of performance with tight goals and rich feedback. It's not more of the same. It's smarter, harder, narrower, and it changes you. What deliberate practice is and isn't. It's not merely participation. Games make you game ready, but they don't fix your footwork or your release. Deliberate practice pulls you out of the scrimmage to isolate and train weak links, shots, moves, conditionings. Quantity matters, and quality matters more. Yet, elite expertise typically rides on thousands of hours of engagement. But the difference maker is what you do with those hours. Chess players improve by playing. Grandmasters study classic positions and probe unfamiliar patterns. It's cognitively demanding. Top violinists at Berlin's elite conservatory practiced alone roughly 24 hours a week versus 9 for future teachers. Same 80-minute sessions, but the concert track students needed a nap afterwards. If you can grind for 3 to 5 hours straight, you're not doing deliberate practice. Talent myths versus practice reality. The evidence is stubborn. Innate ability explains far less than disciplined, targeted practice. When someone says, I just don't have the talent, read it as, I don't have or can't access the time, will, coaching, or conditions to practice that much. Expertise is domain-specific. Chess masters recall real board positions astonishingly well, but not random ones. Abacus champions mentally move beads to some brutal streams of numbers at 2.5-second intervals, yet they're average at recalling word lists. Practice builds specialized machinery, not a global superpower. Why it works? There are 2 cognitive engines. Chunking is the first. We start with tiny steps under verbal control, push the clutch, off the gas, to neutral. With practice, those micro steps bind into procedures, a chunk, and later into automated sequences, shift gears, that run without conscious micromanagement. The same compression happens conceptually. Within subjects, knowledge reorganization. Practice doesn't make you faster. It rewires how you classify problems. Novices see a spring problem versus inclined plane. Experts see conservation of energy in both. Memory search reorganizes around what matters. Beginners recall Freud faster if cued by the letter F, but professors retrieve faster if cued by the subdiscipline, psychoanalysis. Practice reshapes your internal filing system to reflect the deep structure of the work. The bottom line? Deliberate practice is the disciplined path past plateaus, targeted goals, focused effort, immediate feedback, and thoughtful rest, repeated over time. It automates what should be automatic, reorganizes what should be central, and frees you to operate at a higher level, whether you're shooting free throws, providing theorems, teaching fractions, or crafting prose. Chapter E, Elaboration, Making Memories Meaningful. Sandra met somebody in a mall. The woman gave her a phone number, and she kept repeating it because she had no place to write it down. She kept repeating 422-8888 until somebody asked her where the restroom was, and it wiped it out of her memory. She kept repeating the number in working memory, but it never made the jump to long-term memory. Elaboration is the fix by weaving new information into what you already know. She could have said, this will be my 4th client. 4 divided by 2 equals 2. So that would have her remember 422. And then 4 8 digits. You create meaningful connections to make the later retrieval far more likely. Rehearsal keeps ideas afloat briefly, but elaboration anchors them so you can actually find them when you need them. So how does this work? Well, there's 2 key systems at work here. Working memory, which is small, temporary, easily overwritten, or long-term memory, Fast and durable, but only useful if you can retrieve the right item at the right time. Elaboration is an encoding strategy that forges links from what's in working memory to rich neighborhoods in long-term memory. Later, retrieval spreads activation through those links. Ask, what's my Bank of America password? And associations like America, Brave Eagles, Bald and Bold can guide you back. Without links, memories become isolated papers in a box. You just can't search through them. Why elaboration beats bare repetition? Even light, meaning-focused processing outperforms copying for low-effort tasks. In a classic study, memorizing 100 words, judging whether each word fit the term economic, doubled recall over copying and quadrupled it over crossing out vowels. The key is relevance and precision. The tall man purchased the crackers that were on the top shelf makes tall matter. Recall of tall later jumped to 74% versus 42% with no elaboration and 22% with an irrelevant tag. You said it was on sale. When students generated precise, relevant elaborations themselves, recall hit 91%. So here are some simple but powerful elaboration moves. Make precise, relevant because links. A group of woodpeckers is called a descent because they peck downward together. Even a made-up reason helps hide the words, though truth-based elaborations avoid spreading misconceptions in your brain. Chunk them into larger meaningful units. Bunch of numbers, 2, 6, 2, 4, 2, 2, 2, 0. If you remember those as 26, 24, 22, and 20, then you notice the 2 pattern. Prior knowledge enables chunking, and chunking reduces the cognitive load and multiplies retrieval cues. Word lists become a sentence tethered to experience. The word house, dog, car, sprint, spring. If you want to remember those, last spring, my dog sprinted from the house to chase a car. It makes it much easier to memorize. And piggybacking on well-structured knowledge is another way. Place steps along a familiar route. Later, walk to recall each piece. An alphabet search for names, A, B, C, to jog memory, is called the pegging method. The method of loci, this is called the memory palace in some books, and you'd walk into the house and you would remember in the room on your left, there would be something on each wall, and that's how you would remember those things. When elaboration delivers, stronger cued recall, the kind most school tasks demand, given a cue, term, prompt, partial stem, your network has multiple paths to the target. Not just more stuff remembered, but better access when it counts, because you build roads, not piles. Teaching yourself and your kids to elaborate. Strategies are teachable and sticky. Adolescents trained to visualize, invent stories, and link to prior knowledge remembered more a month later without coaching. 5-year-olds trained to imagine paired objects interacting, a hat on a duck, a rock on a spoon, nearly doubled cued recall over kids who only saw pairs side by side. Bottom line, repetition keeps information spinning in place. Elaboration stitches it into the fabric of what you already know. Build precise, relevant connections, chunk smartly, and lean on familiar structures. Do that, and you won't just remember more. You'll remember when it. F is for feedback, supporting self-improvement. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Practice with feedback is what nudges practice toward perfect. If you're shooting arrows without ever checking the target, you'll cement your current aim, not improve it. That's the core. Feedback is information that flows back about the quality of your ideas and actions so you can adjust. What feedback really is and why informative beats generic. Informative feedback tells you how your current outcome differs from your goal. It points to the gap. That's different from pure reinforcement, rewards and punishment, which changes likelihoods but often doesn't explain what to fix. Think of a softball fielder tracking a fly ball. Negative feedback in control theory terms is the mismatch between the ball trajectory and the glove. So she moves. Positive feedback, on track, signals no change is needed. In real learning, both, keep doing that and change this can help, but only if they're specific enough to be actionable. The information spectrum, finding the sweet spot. No feedback, you learn nothing. Right and wrong, slightly better, keep stop, but still vague. Discrepancy, too few supporting statements. Now you know where it fell short. Elaborative explains where and why. Overload, dense grammar lecture mid-revision, too much to use. Sweet spot depends on expertise. Experts can often run on right, wrong, and self-correct, but novices need discrepancy to elaborative guidance, but not a fire hose that breaks the flow, as any good video game designer knows. Designing feedback that actually improves learning. STUN-R, STUN-R. Specific, pinpoint the gap. In many early math apps, kids only get right, wrong. Better, critical corral shows exactly how far off a child's 5 fish for 7 patrons answer is and lets them nudge up or down. Now the distance to the goal is visible. Timely, close enough to the action that learners can solve the assignment of credit puzzle. What exactly caused the miss? Sometimes immediate is best. Sometimes a slight delay helps learners see downstream consequences. Let them reach 0 equals 0 in algebra before surfacing the earlier cancellation error. Understandable. Make the signal pop. Supervise feedback. Teacher comments, a video review of performance highlights what to notice. Or build internal standards so learners can self-detect. Can I reconstruct the participants' experience in this study? Becomes a personal check for understanding research articles. And non-threatening. Keep eyes on the task, not the ego. Designers fail early, fail often, and improve the thing. Keep your eyes on the tasks, not the ego. Designers fail early, fail often, and improve the thing. Structure team answers, normalize iteration, and when you're praising or critiquing something, do it at the work level. For example, your alliteration is effective, rather than at the person level. You're a natural. And revisable. Give a reason and a chance to use the feedback. The 9th grader who shrugs at a return math test will spend Saturdays fixing free throws because games keep coming. Schools should foreshadow trajectories of revision too, opportunities to rework, not just receive a grade and move on. What feedback accomplishes and how we know. Across 100+ studies, meta-analyses show that feedback boosts learning on average, and often substantially when done well. Most feedback supports incremental tuning, but sometimes it must trigger a conceptual reset, such as dolphins aren't fish, won't land without teaching the classification system. Learning to learn from feedback. Experts have built-in standards. A chef can taste overcooked fish, so they naturally use feedback to self-regulate, but novices don't yet know what to hear or feel. On bonus, hear through vibrating skulls. Writers hear their prose differently in their heads than readers do. Language learners can't hear contrasts, left versus right, that they haven't learned to perceive. Start with exaggerated contrasts, then narrow them so learners can finally detect and thus use the feedback. Bottom line, feedback is the steering wheel of learning. Make the gap visible, make it soon, make it make sense, make it safe, and make it usable through revision. Do that, and practice doesn't just become permanent, it becomes progressively better. Chapter G. Generation, Building Lasting Memories. Collaboration stitches new ideas into what you know. Generation is the workout that makes those stitches durable. The rule of thumb is simple. Every time you successfully pull up a memory from a cue, you make it easier to pull it up next time. That's why the humble flashcards belong in the Learning Hall of Fame. Cheap, portable, and perfectly tuned to the generation effect. What generation is and why it beats rereading. Generation is a retrieval practice technique. You already encoded the information, now you practice recalling it from a hint. Teaching mostly helps with encoding. Homework, quizzes, and flashcards should exercise retrieval. Classic demo, you'll remember more of the words you had to generate. Rapid from RAPID, clever from CVR, than the ones you simply read. 8, leap, about 25% more after a short delay. You'll even remember rapid better than fast in the same pair because rapid was the target you generated. The muscle analogy is apt. You strengthen exactly what you'll need later, finding the right answer from partial cues. Being told cottage cheese, cheesecake, Swiss cheese builds familiarity. Generating cheese from cottage, cake from Swiss builds retrieval power. 2 time-based truths. Forgetting and spacing. Memories decay fastest early on, then flatten, the familiar power law. Cramming works for tomorrow's quiz but collapses by finals. The spacing effect counteracts that decay. Split 20 minutes across 2 days and you'll remember more a month later than packing it into one 20-minute burst. Roughly a 10% spaced practice advantage in meta-analyses. Why? It's harder to retrieve after a delay, and that extra effort forges a stronger trace. Sleep helps consolidate too. Practice, sleep, practice again. How to use generation well. Keep difficulty desirable. Too easy and you coast. Too hard and you stall. Aim for effortful success. Expand practice over time. Add load gradually while reactivating prior mental card. Card 1, cards 1 and 2, cards 1, 2, and 3. Or for chemistry, recall a few missing atoms in caffeine structure. Next round, recall those plus new missing bonds. Keep widening until caffeine cues the full molecule from scratch. Practice both directions. Retrieval strengthens targets, not cues. If you ever go word to definition, you'll be weak at definition to word. Flip your cards and alternate. Space sessions and sleep in between. 10 minutes today, 10 minutes tomorrow beats 20 today. Nightly micro sessions compound via consolidation. Why generation delivers. Better free recall. When prompts are weak, finals, essays, conversations from last month, retrieval practice pays off the most. The testing effect? Simply taking a test boosts later memory because it forces generation. Not more exams as a philosophy, but more low-stakes retrieval woven into learning. Remember, wanting to remember isn't a strategy. Generation and elaboration are. Build a routine, brief spaced retrieval bouts, flip cues and targets, escalate with expanded sets. Bottom line, generation is precision strength training for memory. Effect, high effort retrieval from cues, repeated over spaced sessions in both directions. Do that, and what you know won't just feel familiar, it'll be findable when it comes. Chapter H, hands-on, recruiting the body's intelligence. We live by words and symbols, but our bodies are smarter than we remember. Hands-on learning taps that perceptual motor intelligence so abstract ideas actually make sense. Think of it as letting the body explain the concept, then linking that felt meaning to the math or language. Why hands-on helps ideas click. Verbal reasoning often misses what the body immediately knows. Most people misjudge which cup pours first in the thin versus wide cup puzzle, until they mime tilting each cup with a hand and feel the thin one must tilt farther. The motor system nails what words miss. Embodied cognition means that we recruit perception and action to structure abstract thought. Acceleration isn't just an F equals ma problem. It's the push you feel into your seat. Some physics only lands once you've felt it. Rotational inertia, a hollow ball rolls slower than a solid one. Hard to swallow from text alone. But spin in a chair with arms out and then pull them in. You speed up. Now the mass is closer to the axis, so there's a faster spin. An idea that has a bodily anchor. How the body gives structure to symbols. Sense of magnitude. You're faster to see 1 dot on a page versus 5 dots on a page, or 4 dots on a page. And crucially, you're also faster to judge 1 versus 5, 4 versus 5, even though the digits themselves don't look bigger. Your perceptual magnitude system quietly scaffolds numeric symbols. Symmetry for integers. Negatives aren't out there in the world, but symmetry around 0 is deeply perceptual. Adults recruit symmetry when judging -2 versus 1, or the midpoint of -8 and 6. Fourth graders learned integer addition better with a folding number line hinged at 0. Layout +3 to the right, -2 to the left, fold at 0. Compare the columns, and the extra block reveals +1. 2 days physical, then a software version, and students later solve novel problems like placing positive and negative fractions, far better than peers who used manipulatives that didn't highlight symmetry. Designing hands-on that teaches the right thing. There's no one-size-fits-all manipulation. You must spotlight the right perceptual property for the concept. Normal force. Tables pushing back is abstract. Springs aren't. Have students compress springs with weights, then use bendy boards with stiffer boards until they see table as spring and the adjustable counterforce clicks. Physical versus digital. In math, vision often suffices. Software can channel attention to the right pattern, such as symmetry. In science, some forces must be felt. You can imagine the skater, but to grasp gyroscopic behavior, a spinning wheel resisting tilt, you need to hold the wheel. Bottom line, hands-on learning recruits the body's quiet expertise to ground symbols in felt structure, magnitude, symmetry, force, grouping. Do the thing, notice the right feature, and then name and formalize it. Keep the focus on sense-making and vary the fade, the supports, and let the body teach the mind what the symbols really mean. Chapter I. Imaginative play, developing cognitive control. Give a child a stick and they'll make a swooshing airplane. That little move, letting one thing stand for another, is the heart of imaginative play. In theory, this kind of pretend should strengthen symbolic thinking, creativity, intelligence, social savvy, and especially cognitive control, the ability to hold some ideas in the mind, inhibit others, and switch perspectives. In practice, the evidence is still mixed. Play does many things at once, which makes its specific effects hard to isolate. Still, we can see clearly how it exercises the mind's off-the-rails capacities, stepping back from stimulus-driven reactions and constructing alternatives in thought. Why imaginative play is training. From stimulus-driven to thought-driven. A dog salivates at a sausage. A child turns the sausage into a plane. A puppy nips and gets nipped back. A child gets hit and pauses to choose, cry, hit back, or tell. Pretend requires inhibiting the literal and installing a new meaning. Cognitive control in action. In Michel's marshmallow task, telling kids to imagine taste, yum, makes impulse worse. Telling them to imagine the marshmallow as a picture turns down appetite and turns up control. Imagination done right helps kids switch mindsets. So, does pretend grow executive function, creativity, and social skill? The short answer, we don't know for sure. Play is like the mouth. It serves many functions. Eat, talk, kiss, whistle. So pinning any one outcome to it is tough. Correlations abound. Kids who do more social fantasy play often look more socially skilled, but causation is murky. Theater and social outcomes. In a 36-week randomized trial, drama lessons improved parent-rated social competence, while music lessons improved IQ. Drama is imaginative play, but it also adds rich adult-child social interaction, so we can't cleanly credit pretend itself. Animal side note. Rats don't do imaginative play, but they do rough and tumble. Juveniles with just 1 hour a day of play fighting and little other social contact grew into less fearful, more socially competent adults than peers with lots of adult grooming but no play. For social adjustment in rats, play mattered more than generic social time. Bottom line, imaginative play is practice in becoming less stimulus-driven and more thought-driven, inhibiting the obvious, stalling alternatives, coordinating with rules and roles. The causal arrows to broad development gains are hard to prove, but as a vehicle for executive function workouts, motivation, and flexible problem solving, pretend is powerful, especially when adults design for anticipation and agency and then get out of the way. Chapter J. Just-in-time telling, making lectures and readings work. You don't appreciate a solution until you've wrestled with the problem it solves. That's the simple engine behind just-in-time telling. Let students first encounter a well-chosen problem, then tell the explanation theory or formula. Experience builds the if, exposition delivers the then. Together they turn inert knowledge into usable knowledge. How it works and why the order matters. Experience first, explanation second. Business and military simulations do this well. You act, then debrief. Without the experience, a debrief is just words. Without the debrief, an experience is just a story. Put them together in the right order and you get a principle you can carry forward. Knowledge needs both parts, if yielding then. We overteach the then, add and divide by n, and underteach the if. You need an average here. Students can recite but can't recognize when it applies. A memory example that makes this point. Before the lecture, students examined raw recall data from a word list study and graphed what they noticed. Patterns jumped out. Bag, hand, and chair appeared first. Car and sky were more common. They experienced this phenomena. After the lecture, everyone got the theories: primacy, recency, and coding versus retrieval. Results: on simple true-false facts, both groups did just fine, but a week later, only the ones that graphed first could predict outcomes for new cases, which would be transfer. They had learned conditions of use, the if. Students who only analyzed data twice, no lecture, did poorly on facts and transfer. Experience alone doesn't generalize it. It needs principled telling. Designing the setup for telling. 2 design rules. Frame an actual problem to solve. Make the experience precise. Match to the content you'll tell. Problem frame, not random activity. Don't just walk in a forest before a navigation lecture. Give the problem. Get from A to B with map and compass. For pre-service teachers, use curated classroom videos that surface the top 10 management problems and have them propose fixes, so the later lecture lands exactly on those problems. Precision matters. Design a dam is too broad. If your lecture is about pressure increasing with depth and wall pitch, give tasks that make differential water pressure unavoidable. A great precision example: variability. Students compared pitching machines using dot grids, each dot a pitch, and had to invent a reliability number. Contrast made key issues visible: density versus perimeter of spread, unequal sample size, and after this, the standard deviation formula makes sense, including why we divide by n. Students who did this first could explain the pieces of the equation. Those who didn't couldn't. Simulations: explore briefly, then target a problem. Let students fiddle a few minutes to learn controls, then set a precise task. Find 3 different cannon settings, velocity, height, angle, that hit the same target. Then prime them for the forthcoming principles. What you should expect as outcomes. Purposeful understandings. Students can answer why divide by n instead of because the formula says so. They can handle the why and what if questions. Usable knowledge, not inert. When they've experienced the applicability conditions, they recognize when to use what they know, like novice clinicians who only start diagnosing well after seeing the ifs that cause each syndrome. Teaching students to teach themselves this way. People naturally ask for explanations when stuck, but they rarely precede the right experiences before reading or listening. There's little evidence that we can train seek the right experience first as a general habit. Still, you can structure courses to build that rhythm: a short encounter, telling them, and then practice. Expect resistance. Students used to teach the practice may complain that pre-lecture problems don't look like the test. In studies, the try-first students later perform better, even though it didn't feel that way to them at the time. Bottom line, just-in-time telling is not anti-lecture. It's pro-lecture done in the right order. First, craft a precise, problem-centered experience that makes the key features unavoidable. Then, deliver a clean explanation that names the principles and connects what students just struggled with. That sequence builds the if and then, turning a haze of words into tools students can actually use. Chapter K, Knowledge, an essay on efficiency and innovation in knowledge. Knowledge is the quiet engine behind everything we learn and do. Prior knowledge lets us make sense of new ideas. New knowledge lets us attempt what we couldn't even imagine before. In this section, I want to untangle a common confusion in education. We often treat 2 important goals, efficiency and innovation, as if they're rivals, when in fact, learners need both, and they work best in concert. The 2 big outcomes of knowledge: learning for efficiency, that's building strong, fast, reliable ways to solve recurring problems, and learning for innovation, developing the stance and skill to adapt, frame, and create new knowledge when conditions change. Learning for efficiency. The knowledge is power thesis is really knowledge makes you efficient. Newell and Simon's general problem solver showed the limits of general strategies, weak methods. They work everywhere but are slow and effortful. Experts mostly use strong methods, knowledge-saturated shortcuts turned to a domain. Novice chess players simulate moves. Experts scan for open files and diagonals. Efficient knowledge is rapid to retrieve, accurate to apply, and consistent under time pressure. It predicts performance better than raw ability. Practice matters. See Chapter D. It also buoys learning and even offsets aging-related declines in working memory. In Hambrick and Engel's baseball study, older fans with domain knowledge remembered more broadcasted details than younger non-fans, despite the younger group's stronger short-term memory. That's efficiency at work. Again, it's rapid to retrieve, accurate to apply, and consistent under time pressure. We also measure it constantly. Most school tests are sequestered efficiency checks. One right answer, no resource, solve it now. They reward the ability to execute routine solutions quickly. Learning for innovation. Efficiency shines in stable environments, but real life shifts. Sometimes efficiency becomes a trap. When context changes, tiny differences can derail highly tuned routines. During the 2000 Olympics, a vault set 2 inches too low threw world-class gymnasts off. Hyper-efficient patterns collided with a small perturbation. Knowledge is power. It also has bias. We see what we expect to see. Physics students more easily interpret data that fits prior beliefs and overlook contradictory patterns. Tourists imagine culture belongs to others. We frame problems with yesterday's assumptions and then get stuck. Reframing unlocks breakthroughs. Engineers tried to design a gentler tomato picker. Botanists reframed the task, designed a tougher tomato. That simple shift opened a new solution space, firmer if less tasty tomatoes. Interdisciplinary perspectives help us notice our own blinders. This is the core difference between routine experience, astonishing efficiency in well-rehearsed context, abacus masters doing mental arithmetic flawlessly, but only in quiet, stable conditions, and adaptive expertise, fluency plus flexibility, a willingness to embrace variation, learn and invent when the familiar doesn't fit. Moving learners toward adaptive expertise. If we want adaptive experts, we can design environments that lower the short-term risk of the imperfect performance so people don't retreat to the safe and known. Expose them to meaningful variations so they generalize beyond a single template. And normalize understanding and experimentation, not just the speed and accuracy. We should also measure what we value. Sequestered efficiency tests can't see adaptability. Preparation for future learning assessments do. They give learners new information during the test and ask whether they can recognize gaps, learn, and apply them. This is closer to real expertise, not what do you already know, but how quickly and wisely can you learn what you now need. Here's a medical example. Traditional licensure exams predict routine recall under pressure, but poorly predict on-the-job learning. A better gauge, present a familiar case with one discrepant symptom and see who notices, seeks resources, and updates the diagnosis. A thought experiment about college. Ask grads on the spot why seasons change, and you'll catch many flat-footed. Give a day to learn, and college-trained learners typically outpace high schoolers. Blending efficiency and innovation in the right order. It's tempting to put efficiency and innovation at opposite ends of a line. Direct instruction versus discovery. Teacher-centered versus student-centered. That's a false choice. Efficiency can free attention for innovation. Innovation can make efficient solutions meaningful and better used. The order, however, matters. Our claim, consistent with just-in-time telling, Chapter J, is this. First, engage learners in disciplinary innovation. Let them explore the problem space, notice variation, and try to invent a workable approach. Then, consolidate with efficient solutions. Name the principle, show the standard method, and practice it for speed and reliability. Why in this order? If you tell first, learners lock onto the procedure and miss the deeper structure. Bottom line, efficient knowledge makes you fast and reliable when the world is familiar. Innovative knowledge makes you adaptable when it isn't. Education that treats these as rivals misses what experts really do. They leverage efficiency to free attention, notice when efficiency is binding them, and then learn anew. Start with disciplined innovation to understand the problem space. Follow with efficient solutions to gain power. That pairing is how knowledge fuels both performance today and discovery tomorrow. Chapter L. Listening and sharing. Learning more together than alone. Collaboration isn't magic. It's a set of learnable moves. When listening and sharing are intentional, small groups can outlearn individuals, build motivation, and develop durable cooperation skills. When they're absent, we get the familiar group project train wreck. A couple of students take over, someone checks out, and good ideas never get a hearing. Why collaboration works when it works. The historical root. Post-World War II research on cooperation framed collaboration as a peacetime skill, negotiate rather than fight. In classrooms, it turns out to be a learning amplifier too. Students who really collaborate learn content better and also improve at cooperating. Cautionary tale, in a literature group, Carrot and Josh dominate, Elizabeth is ignored. Daryl disengages. They produce something, but it isn't collaborative learning. The missing ingredients are the core mechanics below. 5 mechanics of productive collaboration. 1. Joint attention. Collaborators must focus on the same thing at the same time. Visual anchors, shared diagrams, documents help. Example, in a remote circuits task, partners who saw a live eye-tracking dot of each other's gaze coordinated better and learned more than those without it. Listening. Not just waiting to talk, but taking up what others say. Many groups fail because members keep pitching ideas that no one engages. Number 3, sharing. 2 levels, shared goals and shared ideas. Without a common aim, people work at cross purposes without contributions. There's nothing to build on. And second part, simple scaffolds help. 2 likes and a wish to structure constructive critique. 4, coordinating. Turn-taking, role partitioning, and timing matter. Without light structure, discussions can dissolve into interruptions or a few voices dominating. And 5, perspective-taking. The learning sweet spot. Understanding why someone sees it that way. Diverse viewpoints spark conceptual change and clarify your own thinking. Example, in a global MOOC, geographically diverse groups saw the largest learning gains, more perspectives to grapple with. How to make listening and sharing lift learning. Establish explicit norms and roles. Norms pay attention to group needs. No one is done until everyone is done. Explain by telling, not doing. Everyone speaks, ask what others think, give a reason, have a plan. Practice norms as behavior before diving into content. Use an observer role to tally behaviors. Turns taken, reasons given, then debrief. Roles to coordinate. Facilitator enforces the norms. Recorder takes the notes. Resource manager, materials and info. Reporter synthesizes. Rotate and coach these. Unprepared facilitators can sap motivation. Assign group-worthy tasks. If one competent person could finish it alone, groups will copy the fastest student. Choose tasks that require multiple minds, offer multiple defensive approaches, and leave parameters to decide. Example, we have 3 30 by 30 by 96-inch tables. How many guests can we invite? It invites choices, seating comfort, table arrangement, kids versus adult, space for contributions and justified trade-offs. Build interdependence and accountability. Combine individual and group assessment. One effective college pattern, individual tests, small group discussions on the same items, individual retake, final grades blend both. This creates a reason to listen to peers and preserves personal responsibility. What outcomes to expect? Typical case, groups beat the average individual, but not the best individual working alone. Brainstorming is a classic. Groups generate more ideas than average individuals, yet fewer than the best solo ideator. Tip, brainstorm individually first, then pool. Group-worthy advantage, some tasks exceed solo capacity within the time, such as building a house via divide and conquer. The holy grail, emergent products no individual would make. In 7th grade problem solving, 3/4 of pairs produced abstract structural representations like matrices versus 6% of individuals. He wanted rows, I wanted columns. Became a matrix. True integration via listening and sharing. Do students learn to cooperate for the long haul? Yes, when taught. After training on cooperative norms during disaster planning tasks, students applied those norms later without prompts. 2 years post-training, fifth graders showed more cooperative behaviors, fewer interruptions, and more unsolicited explanations. Measuring cooperation is hard. New assessments are beginning to probe negotiation, consensus building, and divide and conquer. An example would be responding to a dismissive teammate. Best choice recenters the group on shared options. Bottom line here, collaborative learning pays off when we engineer for it. Shared focus, real listening, frequent sharing, smooth coordination, and deliberate perspective taking. With the right norms, roles, and group-worthy tasks, two heads don't just average out. They build something neither would have built alone. So that's where we'll stop for today. This has been part 1 of the ABCs of How We Learn by Daniel Schwartz, Jessima Tsang, and Kristen Blair. Remember that our website is innoguide.net, where we have many resources for innovators, people building medical products, and those who want to learn AI. I want to thank Steve McIntyre for producing this, and I want to thank you for joining. I look forward to seeing you next time. That's a wrap.